Live. Welcome to the live. I am Shaunie Sanders. I am host of the Girl Take Note podcast, and I wanted to come live and try to talk about how to start a podcast. We are streaming live on two platforms. We're streaming live here on TikTok, and also we're streaming live here on YouTube as well. Let me fix this video here for YouTube. But I wanted to come on because I want to talk about how to start a podcast. How do you start a podcast? I get questions all the time about how do you start a podcast? What's the first steps to starting a podcast? I know a lot of people have questions when it comes to starting a podcast. So I wanted to come on live and just kind of answer those questions right away. Thank you guys for joining the live. Thank you guys for joining live. Again, we're streaming live here on TikTok and on YouTube, which is something I haven't done before. But I wanted to come live and answer questions regarding podcasting because I get a lot of questions. I get a lot of questions submitted to me through my DMs, through just chats on how do we start a podcast. And so I want to go through a list of questions that I have already, that people have already submitted to me. And I just want to kind of run through those and give you guys just some information on if you are looking to start a podcast, what are some of the things you can do to get started. Believe it or not, it's not bad to, it's not so hard to start a podcast, but I just want to give you guys some information on it so you guys have some information and you can decide for yourself if podcasting is going to be something you want to do. So one of the first questions that I get, I'm not taking anybody on with me, so you guys, but thank you guys for joining live, but I'm not bringing on any guests right at the moment. I just kind of want to get through these questions as quickly as possible and see if anybody else have any questions that they might want to ask regarding how to start a podcast. So the first question I get all the time, which is a question I think a lot of people want to know, is do I have to do video podcasting or can I just do audio? And the big answer around that is yes, you can just do audio podcasting. You do not have to do video. You can only do audio podcasts because only one, when we think about the streaming platforms versus the video platforms, like our TikToks, like our YouTube shorts, like YouTube, like Instagram Reels, when you think about streaming platforms are audio, except for Spotify. Spotify is the only one that allow you to upload video podcasting and video versions of your podcast. But when you think about how people consume podcasts, this is what you really have to think about when it comes to starting your podcast if you want to do video or audio only. You think about how people consume podcasts, right? Most people listen to podcasts while they're at the gym. Most people are going to listen to a podcast if they're like out walking, like if they're working out, if they're driving in their car. Most people are listening to it just when they're actually busy doing things, right? And so that's what you have to say to yourself, which one is most important to you when it comes to your podcast? And so audio is a big piece of podcasts. So I would tell you, if you are comfortable with being on camera, if you are comfortable showing yourself on camera, then I would definitely tell you to do a video podcast because video is definitely where we're headed. Video is where it's at when it comes to podcasts. It allows you to get larger reach with your podcast to a broader audience. It allows you to have more visibility on your podcast. So I would tell you that you don't have to do video, but video is highly recommended. But it really does go to your level of comfortability when it comes to being on camera. Because a lot of people are not comfortable with being on camera. A lot of people are okay with their voice being heard right behind the mic, but a lot of people don't want to show their face. So you really have to decide. But when it comes to marketing your podcast, a big piece of that is being able to take short clips of your episode and being able to push that on your social platforms, push that through ads or however you choose to give your podcast the visibility that it needs in order to get to a larger crowd. So I wanted to give that's the first question that I get when most people ask me about how to start a podcast. I've had my podcast for about almost 2 years now. I've grown this podcast to 30,000 downloads. And it was so many different ways that I did that outside of just marketing on social media. There's multiple ways that you can get people to download your podcast, because when you think about the audience on social media versus the audience that actually listen to podcasts and download them on their phone, they're really two different audiences. But that's for another day. When it comes to podcast marketing, we'll talk about that another time. That's for another day. Now, the next question that I get that a lot of people ask me when it comes to podcasting is, how do I put my podcast on the streaming platforms? And I know some people who just go and submit their podcast one by one, but I'm not that kind of person. If you really want your podcast to be distributed to all the streaming platforms, you definitely want to make sure that you put your podcast with a streaming network, which is like a Spotify, right? Spotify does Spotify for podcasters. You have Red Circle, you have Buzzsprout. Those types of platforms will allow you to upload your podcast, and then they distribute your podcast to multiple streaming platforms where you don't have to do it one by one, because that one by one kind of thing can be kind of draining. Like every time you do a podcast, you're going to upload it one by one. When honestly, if you just get one of the streaming platforms, they will actually submit your podcast to all streaming. My podcast is available on every streaming platform that you can think of. iHeartRadio, it's on Amazon Music, it's on Spotify, it's on Apple, it's on so many different platforms. So there's still, it's really the easiest way to go. I do know some people that submit their podcasts one by one, but it's easier just to use one of the hosting platforms to submit your podcast to and let them do the distribution. And the most popular one that is free that you can use right now is Spotify for Podcasters. Spotify for Podcasters is one that I use currently. It's free. You can upload your episodes. They distribute your episodes, but also Spotify gives you the opportunity to upload video. They're the only streaming platform that allows you to upload video to your podcast, right? Because some people are consuming video on Spotify. If you think about it, there's a lot of videos, music videos on Spotify. And so now podcasters are allowed to upload video as well, so that way they can have that too on their platform. So the big answer to that is get with a streaming platform, a hosting platform that can really push your podcast to all these different streaming platforms where you don't have to do it one by one, because that becomes tedious, and who really wants to do that, right? When you can just upload one place and they submit it to all these places at one time. You can schedule it, you can release it right away. It's really your decision, right? But guys, thank you for joining the live. Like I said, listen, we are live here on TikTok. We are live here on YouTube as well. I am Shaunie Sanders. I am host of the Girl Take No podcast. And I just wanted to come on and answer a few questions, like I said, on how to start a podcast. I'll be doing these daily, or maybe weekly. I'm not gonna say daily, maybe weekly. I might be doing these weekly where I answer questions on how do you start a podcast. I get questions submitted to me all the time through my DMs on all my platforms. So I just decided that, you know what, I want to go ahead and do a live stream for it so I can answer questions that were already submitted to me for those who want to join and watch, and also answer any questions that you might have, right? You might have in that you want to answer me to answer right now live here while we're doing this. One of the things also that I plan on doing to give people a little bit more insight and in-depth training also on how to start, I will be offering a course, not a free course, but a course, very low price course on how to get started. I also offer consultations, one-on-ones. If you guys want a one-on-one, all you have to do is click the link in my bio and you can kind of sign up for a one-on-one consultation. And then we kind of talk through your whole podcast strategy and getting started, or I just give you a little bit more answers. So if you guys are looking for something more, there will be many options available. I will be having a course for how do you market your podcast to get to 30,000 stream loads within a year. It's definitely going to be beneficial to those who are truly looking to start a podcast, because podcasting is definitely where it's at. It's a huge platform. It's an opportunity for your voice to be heard. You gain really a lot of great visibility. It's an opportunity for those who want to become thought leaders in their industry. So although it may be a lot of podcasts out there, there's still a lot of room for growth in this industry, and there's still a lot of room for new podcasters to come on and make their mark as well. So don't give up. Podcasting is definitely a great form to market your product, your services, your business, whatever it may be, and also being able to connect and collaborate with other people that are in the journey that you want to actually be in when it comes to podcasting. So don't forget that. Now, next question that a lot of people ask me is, and this is kind of like a very loaded question, but what are the steps to getting started with your podcast? And honestly, like I said before, it's very easy to start a podcast. It's not that hard. If you have a computer, you can start a podcast right away. Your computer has a microphone, your computer has a camera. You can start recording yourself, on your podcast just right there off your computer, download the video, upload it. Easily done, right? So it's not hard to start a podcast. That's the simplest way to get started. I call the lazy way to get started. But there's other ways in terms of like you can purchase equipment. You can purchase a nice camera. If you don't have a camera, you got a camera on your phone. You can do a webcam. So there's so many different things in order to get started with podcasting. It's such a loaded question, which is why I'm going to do the course, because there's so much more into it. But I kind of wanted to answer that question because a lot of people ask me just how do I even get started? And to get started really is all about you. It's about what do you want to talk about, right? Who do you want on your podcast? Are you going to just be solo? Are you going to do an interview podcast? Are you going to have a co-host? So there's different steps to it, but to get started is very simple and it's very easy to get started. That is, I can tell you that. Next question I get, people ask me all the time, is what type of equipment do I need for my podcast? Like I said before, if you are starting out and you don't have a budget, right? You have a very small budget. You can't really invest in any equipment yet, and you can't invest in anything high tech. The best thing for you to do is to use your computer. It's the best thing I can tell you you can do right now. However, you are going to need something to record in. And for me, I like to tell people, I recommend people to use Riverside Studio. It's a very low cost, very high end studio, podcast recording studio that you can use to have virtual guests come on board. You can use to record yourself if you're doing a solo podcast. It is great software that can be downloaded to any computer. You can use it on your cell phone as well. So it also offers you opportunity. It give you video, it give you audio, it generates short clips for you, it generates show notes for you. You can edit directly in the tool. It is truly an all-in-one type of podcast studio that I recommend to everybody. I've been using Riverside for probably like 2 years now, and I love it. I absolutely love it. Never have any issues with it. Always have great communication with the app itself, being able to contact support if you have any issues, which I normally don't. But it's a great app to use. It's a great software to use. I do know some people who like to use Zoom, which is great for them. I hear, the only issue with Zoom is that if your internet goes out, then it goes out. That doesn't happen when it comes to Riverside. If your internet happens to go out, Riverside is still recording, right? It needs Wi-Fi, but it doesn't need the Wi-Fi, honestly. It still records even if your Wi-Fi kind of cuts out and you don't have to stop and re-record. That's one of the great things about Riverside Studio. So I recommend Riverside Studio to everyone who's starting out because you are going to need something to record in. You can still start with your computer. You just need something to record in. And then there's so many other different things I can tell you about to use to get started when it comes to recording audio and video with your podcast. But like I said, I just want to answer a few questions and the rest will be available in my course coming out very soon on how to get you started and how to really set you up for success with launching your podcast, your first podcast. Now, next question I get is, how do I look for guests for my podcast? So if you are a person who wants to interview people, of course, one of the main ways you can do it is that you can reach out to people, right? You can do that outreach. All you have to do is send people emails and ask them, hey, this is the topic. I think you'll be great from this episode. Here's the availability. Here's the dates. Please let me know if you're available for the episode. So a lot of it's just outreach, right? When I first started, I utilized my network. And I would tell people that too. When you're first starting out and you want to interview guests, I would tell you to use your network around you. See who you have in your circle of friends, people you may know that has great background, that can come on, that you'll be easily talk to them, have a great conversation with them, and have them on your podcast. Why not use your immediate circle around you just to get started on your podcast, right? And then I tell people also there are other platforms that you can list your podcast on where people reach directly out to you. I do some outreach. The only outreach I do is for outreach for people who are just bigger names that I want on my show, who I know will bring a lot of visibility to my episodes and to the show itself. And so I do a lot of outreach for those people. And I do a lot of outreach off of LinkedIn. Because my podcast is all about entrepreneurship, right? It's all about the ups and downs of entrepreneurship, how people take that big leap into entrepreneurship, telling those behind the scenes stories and really inspiring people while they're on their journey. And so a lot of people that I reach out to, when I do that outreach, I do it through LinkedIn. That's one of my sources. But also my podcast is listed on different platforms where I get tons of email of people wanting to be on my show. I get it through my website because I do have a website for the podcast, but also I'm with Podmatch and I'm with Match FM. So those two platforms allow me to get so many different guest requests when it comes to people who want to be on my podcast. So there's so many different ways to get guests to be on your podcast. It's really about you. The more you get better at interviewing people, the more people you will gain on your podcast. I'll definitely want to go more into depth when it comes to how the interview styles of how you can interview people and get the questions that you need for your audience so that people can keep coming back. But a lot of that will be in how to start a podcast and also in marketing your podcast as well. So I just wanted to kind of answer that quick question and give you a quick answer on how do you get guests. So a lot of that will be outreach. You're going to have to do some outreach. When you're first starting out and you're a small podcast, you can't get the big names, right? If you didn't already know these big name people, it's hard to get them to come on your show. I'm not even going to lie. So you're going to really have to utilize your network. You're going to have to utilize your network. You're going to have to utilize the people that you know who might know somebody and see what their circle of people look like. But it's not the easiest thing to get on and to get people to come on your podcast who are those big names. Like, we all want those big names on our podcast. We all do. And I'm just now getting to a place where my podcast is recognizable and where people are seeing it, where now I have some big names saying, hey, yeah, I would like to be on your podcast, right? I would like to. And so I'm just now getting to that point. But it takes time to get there. And I still have a long way to go when it comes to that. But I just wanted to make sure you guys know that when you're first starting out, when you're a small podcaster and you're just starting out, you really have to utilize the people around you, the network around you, and really try to get some of those people to come on your podcast just to really give you experience of interviewing people. Right? If you never interviewed no one before, this really allows you to get the experience of interviewing people for your podcast. Just kind of give you that experience, kind of get you in the habit of asking the right questions. You can always look, you look at it back and see what you could have did differently. And that's really how you do it. But yeah, if you're gonna try to get people, book people on your podcast, you're gonna have to do some outreach. You're going to have to do some outreach. That's just the way it goes. You got to look for people. You can look at them. You can Google them and try to send them out emails. But I advise a lot of people to use LinkedIn. LinkedIn can really get you access to a lot of people, or get you access to people who know that person, or just try to utilize your resources, or either, like I said, put your podcast, list your podcast on places where people are looking to be booked on podcasts. And that's the good thing about podcasting. People want to be on podcasts. People want to be on it. If they align with what your podcast is about, if they align with your goals of your podcast, right? They want to be on shows. They want to come on. They want to talk about it. Listen, your guests want that visibility as well. They want that piece of audio, that piece of video that they can use to market themselves. So you really have to understand that people want to be on podcasts. People want to get booked on podcasts. So if you're looking to start, know that you're starting in an industry where people want to be on. Business leaders, entrepreneurs, music, artists, no matter who they are, people want visibility. They want people to know who they are. And so coming on podcasts really does do that for them. So listen, everyone, thank you for joining the live. I appreciate you guys for joining the live. Thank you, guys. This is How to Start a Podcast Q&A. I have questions that were submitted to me numerous times that I decided to come on and say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to start answering questions live to really help someone who is looking to start a podcast. Just encourage them to do it and let them know that it's not hard to do it. It really just depends on you and what you want to do and what your goals are. And so that's why I decided to do this live, and I'm going to continue to do this live weekly to make sure I'm able to answer whatever questions you might have. I am host of the Girl Take No Podcast. I am Shaunie Sanders. I grew my podcast to 30,000 downloads within the first year, and which was extremely successful, and it has been extremely successful, and it's still growing to this day. And I wanted to be able to come on live and offer some advice, some tips and tricks and hacks that you can do in order to help you get started. Because I know when it comes to getting started, being a small podcaster, because I'm still a small podcaster, even though I'm getting up to 30 downloads, right? Within a year, some people get that monthly. And so I'm still working, still trying to get to my goals, but there's so much that I've learned, since being on this journey, and I want to share with everyone that I can. And so that way you guys can have some answers to some of the questions that you want to know if you're looking to start a podcast. So if you're looking to start a podcast, this is definitely where you need to be. You need to come on, check back every week, where I'll be answering questions on how to start a podcast. Just simple questions on how to start that people have submitted. If you have questions too, you want to submit, go ahead and hit me up through the DM. You can drop them down here in the chat. I will answer any questions that I can. I'll come back live and answer your questions. But let's go ahead and get the conversation started on how to start. And so, so the next thing it is, how do you come up with ideas for your episode? And so I love this question because it differs for everyone. When I started my podcast, I really came up with all my episodes, right? I came up with my episodes and I was just like, oh, I either not even came up with my episodes. I actually booked the guest first and then I build an episode around the guest, which was a great way to start, right? Because when you're starting, you're just trying to get people on. You're just trying to get people on. You're just trying, if you're a solo podcaster, you're just trying to think of ideas that you could talk about, right? That's really what it is. And it all depends on what genre do your podcast want to be in. Like I said, I'm in entrepreneurship. You know what I mean? I'm in entrepreneurship. There's some people who might want to do music. Some people might want to do cooking, crime, mystery, right? Crime podcasts are huge. Some people might want to do more pop culture. Some people might want to do politics, political podcasts. So it really all depends on what you are interested in, what you want to talk about. And so for me, like I said, when I started, I booked my guests and then I built the episode around my guests. And now I realize that going forward, I will now want to create my episodes and now book guests around my episodes. Because when I do that, it allowed me to actually answer the question that my audiences are looking for. Questions that my audience is looking for. So that's what I plan on doing. And so I now create episodes and then I find guests that will fit those episodes because I know what my audience want. They've already told me, hey, you want to know more about this, want to know about financial planning, want to know about more behind the scene footage, want to know more about email marketing. We might want to know more about SEO, or either how do I get my store on Amazon? How do I really win at Shopify, building a Shopify store. So now I know that my audience have that type of interest. And so now I build around that. I have people who wonder, how do I get funding for my business? And so now I have an episode getting ready to come out about how do you fund your business, multiple ways that you can get funding for your business to get started. And so I think it works that way better. You have to understand when you're coming out with your podcast is not necessarily about you. Because you don't want to just be you listening to it. You really have to think about the people you want to listen to your podcast. And you have to create episodes around the people you want to listen versus you. And I had to learn that because a lot of time when I first started, my podcast was about me and what I wanted people to know. When right now I build it around what people ask me for. And that way I know that when I put this episode out, people are going to listen. People are going to interact with it because this is what they were looking for. And that's what you have to remember when you want to start your podcast. Remember that. The next question is, how do you keep listeners coming back to your podcast? Now, this is a loaded question as well. And it's a kind of a question that needs to have its own live, right? But it'll be part of my marketing course that I plan on coming out with that I'll be available to you guys very soon. But there's so many ways to try to keep listeners coming back to your podcast. But the quick answer I can give you is marketing. It's marketing. It's marketing and create episodes that people want to hear. Create episodes that get people want to come back to your show. Because when you think about your podcast, people have to download this. I had 30,000 people download my podcast, right? Because it resonated with them. It has shows on it, episodes on it that spoke to them. And that's why they downloaded it. And so that's what I mean by you have to create episodes around your audience about what people want to know. It's not just about you. It's like what people want to know. What pain points do people want to have resolved for them throughout their journey? And for me, it's throughout their entrepreneur journey. And so I create episodes around that. And I make sure I bring on people who are inspiring, bring on women who are inspiring to them to let them know that you might be going through these struggles on your entrepreneur journey, but you're not the only one. You won't be the only one. And yet you can overcome these things as well. So there's so many. It's like I said, that's a loaded question that I probably get deeper into. I can get deeper into when it comes to consultation. So if you guys want to book a consultation for your podcast, make sure you click the link up below. And if you're not following me, listen, make sure you follow me. Click the link up ahead. Follow me right here on YouTube. Follow me right here on TikTok, because I continue to come on and serve you guys information on how to start a podcast and just great episodes on just podcasting, entrepreneurship. If entrepreneurship is something you want to do and be inspired on your journey by other people's stories, because I believe we get inspired by other people's stories. And so if you guys want to do that, thank you guys. Just make sure you guys follow me. Don't forget to hit the button up there and follow me right here on YouTube as well. All right, guys. Now the final question that I'm going to answer for people who want to know how to start a podcast. One question I get all the time is, should I do series for my podcast? So not series, seasons. So a lot of people like to do seasons. When I first started out podcasting, I did season 1, I did season 2, right? And it's somewhat beneficial if you want, because I feel like if you're gonna offer seasons, then it means once something ends and something new starts, right? It doesn't have to be the same thing. If it's the same thing, then you don't need seasons. Just give your episode, number your episodes, and continue on. So what I tell people to do now, instead of doing seasons, I tell people to do series, right? Because series, and this is another quote, this also answers the question on how to keep listeners coming back. Series, when you do a series, it allows people to come back. You can give them pieces of a series bit by bit. It's what we do when we listen to crime podcasts, right? Crime and murder podcasts, mystery podcasts. When we listen to those types of podcasts, we're listening simply because the podcast host is giving us little information bit by bit. He's not giving us the full thing. He's feeding it to us each episode, which makes us want to come back each episode because we learn something new each episode. And so when it comes to podcasts and any other genre outside of crime, I would tell you to do series. Try to think of a really good series for your podcast that you can give the information piece by piece in each episode, right? You get to determine how long this series is. This series could be your entire podcast season if you wanted to, right? But you get to determine how long it is, and then you get to determine when you're going to give them the final piece. But it gives them piece by piece, and which allows people to say, man, I learned so much in the last series. I got to go back for the next episode of this series so I can find out what happened, so I can get that last piece of information. That allows people to keep coming back. That's how you get people to keep coming back for your podcast. That's how you get people to keep coming back and listening, keep coming back and downloading. Listen, I'm really putting on y'all on some game, because a lot of people don't know this. But this is why these crime podcasts are so successful. People get so invested in a murder mystery, so invested that you come back every week because you want to know, either every day, because you want to know what happened next. And that is one of the main pieces that we have to understand when it comes to podcasting. No matter what genre your podcast is in, we've got to get people to want to come back and want to know what's next. So try to think about a really good series that you can create that can kind of get people wanting to come back for more with your podcast. If you can create a really good series coming out the gate when you're starting, then that allows you to really grab people in, grab that visibility, help you really get those downloads. But you have to think about something that people are going to come back to every week, something that's going to spark their interest, something that's going to spark their attention. And then it's all about how you now market that series on social media, because that's going to be huge too. And I really want to get more into marketing, because marketing your podcast is on social media versus the actual people who download is so different. It's so different. And I really want to get more into that. But today I just want to focus on just a few questions that I normally get, that people ask me when it comes to how do you start a podcast? How do you start a podcast? And it's such simple questions. And also I get a lot of questions on the equipment that a lot of people see on my different channels. And if you want to shop my equipment, it's really linked in my bio. It's linked in my bio. All you have to do is click the link. You can shop my Amazon store, because all my equipment, everything that I have in my studio, and I built my studio in home. I'm an in-home studio girl. Everything that I have, I got it from Amazon. Right? Amazon has everything. So everything I got from Amazon, all my microphones. Now, keep in mind that I have upgraded my podcast studio with all the high-tech equipment. But when I first started, I didn't have a lot of high-tech equipment. I had a microphone that was under $50, but still works really well, right? And that's in my linked in my bio as well, and linked in my store. So if you guys want to know more about that, but yeah, I wanted to come on real quick and do this live. I only want to keep it no more than 30 minutes. I got to jump into some interviews and other stuff that I have to do, but I want to come on each day and try to give you guys some answers when it comes to how do I start a podcast, and come with these questions, because these are the same questions that get submitted to me daily. And because these questions get submitted to me daily, I want to come on, try to come on daily or either weekly. Like I said, there's no set time. I'll let y'all know when it's going to be, and try to answer these episodes, answer these questions for you as much as possible. But also to let you know that I will be coming out with a podcast, how to start a podcast course that will be available to you. Also, I will be coming out with a course on how to market your podcast for success. But also, if you want more of the Girl Take Note, make sure, like I said, follow us here, YouTube, TikTok. Make sure you click the link so you can go ahead and follow us on all social platforms as well. And also make sure you subscribe to the podcast. It's the Girl Take No podcast with me, Shaunie Sanders. And as I said, we'll come on daily and give you guys some answers to your simple questions when it comes to starting a podcast. Don't forget to submit your questions to me via DM if you need to. Also, you can drop questions here in the live. I want to thank everyone who's joined the live. Thank you guys for watching. And I'll see you guys most likely probably back on tomorrow. So I might be back on tomorrow to answer these questions, because for those who missed it, but I'll definitely be back on tomorrow. Bye, guys.